banks are battling to adhere to COVID-19 health protocols at ATMs across the country. And as part of the adjusted regulation of level 3 of the lockdown, they are now legally required to provide sanitizers at all ATMs. But the Banking Association of South Africa says that this is not practical and has indicated that government needs to revise the wording of the regulations. Bongiwe Kunene is the managing director at the Banking Association of South Africa, and she joins us now to explain more of this to us. Ms. Kunene, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much.
So, incidentally, I actually thought about this because I must admit, haven't gone to a bank since the lockdown, so I'm not sure what's actually happening at banks. But I went to an ATM the other day and it actually crossed my mind because I found myself looking around and thinking, okay, so where are the sanitizers? Why is there nothing at this particular ATM for me to actually sanitize? And it was the first thing I did when I got to the car. But what kind of difficulties are banks actually faced with when it comes to these newly adjusted regulations?
Our first is just creating a minimum standard across the sector. What you have right now, because banks have been adhering to anti-COVID-19 measures since last year. So what you had now is a variable approach because each bank has been doing what it thought was right. And now we are asking for time to create a standard for all banks that we can communicate and say to you, to anyone who is a consumer, when you approach an ATM, these are the standards that you should expect. We have started discussions with government, and that is the time we're talking about when we say we're asking for a transitional time to comply.
So as things stand right now, what does it mean? Is the onus not on you as the banks to ensure that health and hygiene measures are actually put in place?
In fact, right now, if you go to a bank, like any other place of business, at the door, you will find that there is management of queues. So the distance as stipulated by the law is adhered to. Secondly, as you enter, you are required to have your mask on and you are given a sanitizer, and then you do your business. What is new now is that every person transacting in an ATM has to sanitize. ATMs are different. There are those which are inside the branches. So there's 100% compliance because you can't get in anyway without sanitizing. Then there are those which are in premises which are not controlled by the banks. It is in premises like the malls, the service stations, convenience shops that we are seeking a rephrasing of the regulations. Given that those premises do not belong to banks, the banks do not have control on who enters those premises, are they sanitized as they enter, and the arrangements on how they sanitize as they touch the ATM, that will need time to be worked out because the practicalities are going to be difficult, and we want to make sure that, again, we can communicate a single standard to every user of the ATM.
Ms. Kunene, as you mentioned, those ATMs that are not attached to branches or located at petrol stations or malls, for instance, who do those ATMs belong to? Do they still belong to the bank or do they belong to the institution wherever they are located?
It's three types. Some belong to the banks. Others, it would be the owner of the premises who approach the bank asking for a kiosk. So the ATM is there at their invitation, and it is serviced by cash in transit companies, and the bank only has responsibility for the switch of that ATM. Then there are other ATMs which are not owned by banks at all, and they belong to third parties. And third parties are companies which have gotten into the business of providing cash to individuals. And they may not be serviced by any bank, but they will be serviced by those who provide cash directly to the ATM.
So what sort of engagements have you engaged in with landlords where they do have ATMs that actually belong to banks?
We've started the engagement. We do believe that it will help if the legal standard is clearly spelled out, putting responsibility for accessing the services of the ATM on all concerned.
So we're talking, according to your media statement on this matter, of an estimated 30,000 ATMs countrywide. That, of course, you know, just on face value, speaks to a potential for the virus spreading rapidly, given how many people actually use ATMs on a daily basis. So in terms of the regulation, what exactly do you want government to change in that wording?
It's the responsibility of ensuring safety rests with all of us who use the ATMs. So if the ATM is in your premises, you have better control than any bank on who gets into your premises, that they are sanitized, that they adhere to social distancing requirements. And of course, depending on who the ATM belongs to that is in your premises, you also have a responsibility of making sure that the regulations are adhered to.
Do you not think, though, Ms. Kunene, that you could take more responsibility even in that regard by, for example, setting up a hotline where if these regulations are not adhered to and that ATM belongs to you, where people can actually report it?
That can be done. It's an issue of time, aligning resources and expectations and capabilities. But it is something that can definitely be done. And we have to remember, as citizens, it's really upon ourselves as well to take care of our health. Even when you have someone in a queue behind you who's got the mask, but it doesn't cover their nose or it doesn't cover their mouth, it's really, a bank is not going to be there to assist you in saying to that other customer, please cover up.
But
remember
equally,
that most of the ATMs which are in these off-site areas are not manned. They operate remotely.
But equally, corporate citizens also need to shoulder part of the responsibility. If you look at, for example, the example that I just gave you, and you said that could be done, surely you can engage further and come up with more ways in which, as a corporate citizen, you know, a bank could do better.
Absolutely. It's all in the discussion and in the resolution, because I wouldn't want to give an impression that it is at a click of a button that decisions like that are taken. There are resource implications, not just money, but also the personnel that's going to do that, and making sure that they are trained properly.
So until the regulations are changed, what are you willing to do differently? Are you going to take responsibility for making sure that we do have sanitizers at all of these ATMs that belong to banks?
Until regulations are amended, we do have a sense that full compliance is going to be possible in branch networks.
So that's all you're willing to take responsibility for, Ms. Kunene?
It's what is possible right now.
I would disagree with that, because if you made a greater effort, as per what we have been discussing, you actually could do better. You actually could impress upon those kiosks that the actual ATMs that are off-site, that still belong to the bank. You could insist on certain rules, as you already do, for people to have those on their premises.
It's a different matter because it's also about your contractual obligations in how that ATM ended there, who does it belong to, and what are the rules of the game in engaging and interfacing with that ATM. What the banks have direct responsibility for is the ultimate switch. And if it becomes a matter that they can't comply, because it is important that we all adhere to the regulations, the solution that most visible is to switch off those ATMs.
Well, we leave it there. We're out of time. Thanks so much, Ms. Bongiwe Kunene, Managing Director at the Banking Association of South Africa, talking to us about banks and what is currently happening regarding their responsibility for taking responsibility with regard to sanitization, for example, of ATMs across the country. And they would like to see government actually amend the regulations in this regard, especially for off-site ATMs where they say and they do not have much control. But of course,